Yeah, the Carbon Pricing Watch, which we put out a summary of today, the whole detailed report will come out in October at the occasion of our annual meetings together with the IMF. Basically what it says is that the value of all the jurisdictions, by that I mean countries, states, provinces that are pricing carbon either with an explicit carbon tax or with an explicit trading system, that total global value is $50 billion. Now, the interesting thing about that is that number is up, and it means that the world has sort of not taken a huge hit in terms of global value as a result of Australia's reversal, and it also means that the Koreans coming in with their trading system in January, which is covering more than 500 companies, have sort of contributed to the mix as well. So now there are others who are in the planning stage. Chile has passed a law or it's got this law for a carbon tax. They're looking at 2018, and of course all eyes are on China, and they're moving from a small number of pilots to a national system. So 50 billion today, hopefully more than that going forward.
At what point do you sense there will be a critical mass of countries which will have some form of carbon pricing, that it makes it almost certain that others will sort of have to follow suit because they'll have to be part of the global market?
Well, I think you look at the Pacific Rim. So if China goes national in 2016, that's a very big news item. But you have Korea, you have New Zealand, Australia with some form of pricing. Then you have Chile intending to do it, Mexico moving in the right direction. You have California with its successful auctions now linked to both Quebec and Ontario. And then you have British Columbia with a tax, which is a revenue neutral tax, which people talk about very favourably. So you're getting to the point, and of course Japan has its own scheme as well. So you're getting to the point where that Pacific Rim, which is a major trading area as well, is beginning to be filled out. Obviously for Europe then, looking across to Asia, that becomes very important. So I think that what you're going to see is, if not a tipping point, then a continued move in the direction of pricing carbon. And what you're going to see is a call for business that they want to know that this is happening. And I think then finally what you'll see is a lot of learning continuing, and people really beginning to amend and improve on the systems that have already been introduced.
I mean, it seems extraordinary the number of business leaders last week in Paris who were saying, let's have a carbon price. I think even the head of, and I might be wrong, but I think even the head of Glencore Xstrata Tony Hayward said, yeah, we need a carbon price. So if a man who is in charge of the world's largest coal exporter for power stations is saying we need a carbon price, what and who is stopping governments from just saying, well, this just makes sense, we have business behind us?
I think that that global conversation, you're right. I mean, something was very different about Paris last week. I think the organisers thought there would be a debate about it, and then obviously by the sort of like 2/3 of the way through the first day, it was like, okay, we better start talking about the specifics because otherwise it's just like a choir. I think that's good. That was a European conference, not exclusively but predominantly. I'm not sure that level of unanimity would be found perhaps in other regions of the world, but the sense that there is growing inevitability about a price on carbon, and if that is the case, then let's get on with it and be clear and let's do it well, I think is really coming from the business community. So now we have to translate that into domestic political situations in countries and in provinces, and you're seeing elected leaders working through, given the structure of my economy, given my level of ambition, are we going to go tax or trading system or blend of the two? Are we going to have other performance measures in the economy to support that? Are we going to get rid of the harmful subsidies that still exist? The price in and of itself is very, very important, but it's not a silver bullet. I mean, other things have to happen. And I think what's really good about this year is that with every country having to write an INDC, these nationally determined contributions, you're starting to see the people who need to be thinking about this, ministers of finance, ministers of planning, ministers of the economy, thinking through the tough decisions about when would be the right point in the economic cycle to do it, how is best to do it, and where can we get the technical help from in order to be able to do it well. And I think that's exactly what we need to be talking about right now.
Does it matter that carbon markets don't seem to feature much at all in the negotiating text? I mean, do you actually need to have some reference to markets in any agreement in Paris, or do you think that what's happening at the moment can operate independently of that process?
Well, you have seen this bottom-up patchwork of country after country, state after state pricing carbon because of an absence of global action. However, it would be bizarre if Paris did not send a clear signal that given that a carbon price is the necessary, if insufficient, step to be taken in order to get spurred up action happening throughout the global economy, it would be bizarre not to mention it. So, I mean, I would want to see, I think, listening to the private sector and listening to countries and what they want, you want to see some reference to the fact that markets are important, some reference to the fact that a price on carbon is a natural economic step to take if you want less carbon in the economy. And the stronger the messaging out of Paris, the better, because investors are going to make long-term decisions based on where they think the direction of travel is and how fast they think we're moving.
And in terms of the spread of a sort of price in carbon, I mean, do you think this is going to spread to sort of India and parts of Africa? Because it seems they have so many other structural economic issues anyway. This would seem to be just adding an extra burden on their economies.
Well, of course, South Africa has already indicated that it's introducing a tax. There are other African countries that are looking very carefully at how they're structuring their economy. You've seen a number of African countries taking steps to remove harmful subsidies. So a lot of African countries, especially those with resource endowments, are taking the opportunity of low oil prices and actually the forced opportunity of fiscal pressure to understand how to get energy prices right by reforming subsidies, and then are prepared to look at this experience of carbon pricing as they see other BRICS and other middle-income countries moving in that direction. In India, the Modi government has taken steps to start removing harmful subsidies and has indicated that it's interested in a technical conversation around carbon pricing. So I think all of that is sensible from their perspective, and all of that makes sense for countries who have to work out over the next 15 years how much they think they're going to contribute.
And you mentioned subsidies, and you talk a lot about fossil fuel subsidies. Last week, I think it was last week, the IMF had a report out, something in the region of 500 trillion, they reckon, with a bit of 5.3 trillion. There you go, lucky you're here, 5.3 trillion. But still, that dwarfs the 50 billion of carbon markets that you were talking about today. Are you getting a bit tired of continually saying we need to cut fossil fuel subsidies, and then you read a report like that which suggests they're going up and up and up?
Well, of course, the economists are having an interesting debate with each other about, what is the definition of a subsidy. Yeah. But I think that what the IMF is indicating is that, we have the direct subsidies of more than 550 billion, where, the consumer is being subsidised directly for their purchase of fuel, right? So that's what people have been, attacking first and foremost. Then there are indirect subsidies, and then there are other externalities that are not being internalised within the economy. When you add all of that up, it's $5.3 trillion. The size of that as a proportion of GDP is substantial, right? It's double digits. So that's basically a measure of the inefficiency in the economy if the pursuit of economic growth has to be in a decarbonised way. So that's a huge wake-up call to all governments about, you can do the difficult things of getting prices right over here, but you've also got to deal with this inefficiency. So I think what we're really asking for is coherence, because it isn't that there isn't enough money in the system, it's just that we are not applying the tools of good economic management to a future which has to be decarbonised.
Okay, final question. I mean, Laurence Toubiana, when we spoke to her earlier on today, said that the French organisers of COP want to have a new text ready by, she said, the end of August. So currently it's 84 pages. Maybe she's looking at 5 or 5 or 10. What for you, and people keep on talking about we need a strong signal, a long-term economic plan, but what for you needs to be in? What are the big pieces that need to be in a text moving forward from August? Not necessarily right at the end, but what elements would you like to see in that text?
Well, so I'm not going to answer your question, because as the World Bank Group, we work on some things and we don't work on others. So we support our clients to show up at these negotiations understanding what their own opportunities are and their own challenges are. So where countries want help with INDCs, we're providing it. The second pillar of Paris is the negotiated text. That's probably where we have the least specific contact, because we're not a member state, we're not negotiating, and our view is a technical one. We're not politically motivated in that sense. The third pillar of Paris is going to be a financial package, and there we are looking together with many other financial institutions on how will we get to a pathway of that 100 billion that was promised in Copenhagen. And of course the fourth pillar is what are being called solutions areas, or what we call working coalitions, and there we're deeply involved in a number of them, trying to show that there is progress and that there are commitments and that there is ambition. But the negotiating text is the one area where we don't have an opinion.
Would you like to see a long-term goal, a long-term climate goal out to 2050, 2060, stipulating some level of greenhouse gas cuts?
Well, what the president of the World Bank said in December when he spoke in Washington during the Lima COP20, was that given that the science is so clear, then the challenge is to manage the global economy to be at zero net emissions in the second half of the century. So we've said that we believe that that is the economic challenge, and therefore, if the science is clear and the economic challenge is going to have to be to manage the economy towards that point, then saying so in Paris would seem to be, a statement of the, if not obvious, then important.